Maybe you're a city boy that's aching to move to the brush. Maybe you've recently moved to a rural setting and the first thing you want to get your hands on is splitting wood. Well, we're going to show you a few things about splitting wood and a few things about starting fires and a few things about pulling trucks out of the ditch and maybe a few other skills that you're going to wish you had if you don't have them already. So never forget that if your axe is sharp, you've got a 3.5 or 4 pound razor blade on the end of a handle, which will really eat your lunch. So get your footing good. I mean, try to stay out of, give yourself the advantage of being able to stay on your feet. Ideally, you know, your feet are about as far apart as your shoulders, but you'll become careless with that as your skill grows. If you need a full-bodied swing, you sort of throw the axe up over your head and you're swinging it, controlling it with your dominant hand and accelerating the swing with the sliding subdominant hand, right? It's like this. The smaller the pieces get, the easier they tend to split, especially if they don't have any knots. I'm going to give this another fairly full-bodied swing. Now here is something, it's wanting to break. You can flip the axe over while it's in the air, bring it down, and then the weight of the piece is supposed to drive the axe right up in there, and instead the camera makes it obstreperous. So to make kindling, I like to get the cross section as narrow as I can before I start actually making the pieces. You can put it back together, choke up on your axe, and right here, you start thinking about getting your hand away. If you've got no confidence and few skills, you can keep all 10 digits by chopping it on its side. See, it's not as tough when you're splitting parallel to the growth rings. You see that? Growth rings are like this. It's not as tough. Put your hand down on the side. So you're looking at two different types of tools. You're looking at a splitting axe, you're looking at a splitting maul here, and a sharp splitting maul here. This splitting maul was my favorite from my childhood. It's never been sharpened in its life. It has a very dull, thick edge. This axe is sharp enough to cut you easily. And this splitting maul from Buck and Billy Ray Smith is also sharp. And even though I have often thought that a dull splitting maul ruptured the piece easier, he sent me this thing and I learned that, you know what, that was just confirmation bias. Let's see how this sharp splitting maul does on maybe this defenseless little round right here. Behaves in about the same way. So these are some pieces of fat wood. They're solid pitch. It is just impregnated with the sap of this Douglas fir tree. It's like gas in a board. Perfectly straight, perfectly flammable. It takes a better woodsman than I to start a fire with just one match every single time. But to give yourself every advantage, you put the most flammable, driest, most combustible kindling you have at the tinder that you have at the bottom, and then stack some pieces progressively bigger moving up. I might put a little bit of newspaper down there just for fun, and then figure a way to shelter your match from the wind. So there's at least two cheater ways, and they both involve fossil fuels. Heaven be thanked. So if you are gutsy enough to pour gasoline on and throw a match in there, get ready to lose some whiskers, stand back. It will hurt you. If you put diesel on it, you're going to be frustrated because diesel acts like it doesn't even want to burn. So I mix a little gas and a little diesel, and it makes a nice flammable mixture that's not as explosive, okay? Now if that was gasoline, I'd be burned right now. And if it was diesel, it wouldn't have lit yet. So the combination is about right. So obviously pretty easy. We move my windbreak. We try not to get the fire truck coming. And the third way for me is get a weed burner. Hold a weed burner on it for, just moments. You can get a fire anywhere, anytime. Just be careful. If you're moving to the country, you're going to have to cut stuff. If you can only afford to buy one saw, and this is hard for me to say, but if you can only buy one cutting implement, make it a Sawzall of some kind. One of these reciprocating saws, I'll show you why. But the first one is you probably got to prune some trees. Just like that. It'll prune trees. Safer than a chainsaw. Extends your reach. Works really good. A Sawzall is useful. It's not perfect, but it's useful even for building things. Pretty good. Lots better than nothing. How about sheet goods? So you can cut. So maybe in a remodeling situation, you've got to make a plunge cut into a wall or a ceiling, and it's real jerky when you start like that. You can turn the blade over. You can take the blade out and turn it over. And now when you start your plunge cut, you can lay the saw right up against the substrate. And you're in. Not only is it easier to start, but you don't have to cut it as far into the wall as to maybe cut, I don't know, a plumbing pipe or an electrical wire that's behind the wall. You can make a longer, shallower cut. Now soon enough, you're going to have to graduate to a chainsaw, a skill saw, a chop saw, a buzz saw, a table saw, all the rest. But to start with, when you first get your feet on the ground in the country, make sure you got some kind of a reciprocating saw or a Sawzall. So you're going to have to know something about how to either keep or get your tools sharp. An axe, a boy's axe, needs to be sharp. It needs to be sharper than that one. And to do that, I'm going to recommend you bring some kind of a file to the job with you. An 8 or a 10-inch mill bastard file is something that is sort of a multi-purpose. I'm not even sure that's what this is. I'm going to move over here. It's safer to file away from the edge. It's effective to have some kind of a clamp to hold an axe down. But if you can't, you make kind of a lateral, smooth cutting motion, understanding the file only cuts on the push. Don't do this, because when you're pulling back, it's like pulling a handsaw back in a cut. It's not doing anything, or at least not anything good. So a file cuts on the push, and you can see the newly exposed metal as an idea of what you're actually making contact with. This is not rocket science. It's not black magic. It's simply removing material at a predictable angle until the material becomes so thin that it's sharp. And it's fairly sharp already. Now there are people who can make an axe shave. I always get bored long before the axe starts shaving, because I've never tried to shave with an axe. We got a video on doing this in more detail. So you get the idea. Set aside some time. Now, if you decide to sharpen towards the axe, you really better pay attention, because it doesn't take much of a piece of bad luck before you need a Band-Aid or some super glue or something. Knives are the same thing, but less of it. You don't want to file your knives away. Now, there could be a situation where a kid took this out onto a rock pile and it's so badly beat up that you start with a file just to begin to reestablish the shape. But probably, and for darn sure on my Leatherman, I love this Leatherman, by the way, you get some kind of a whetstone. That's very smooth. That's for finishing an edge. The other side's just as smooth. Here's one that's a little rougher. You can hear the difference. You can hear it cutting, right? Good way to cut yourself. You try to hold a fixed angle, like shallow. Shallow. I'm not going to claim I know what angle a Leatherman ought to be ground at, but you hold it shallow and you keep it the same. Kind of like you're slicing off the top of the stone, but you're not. What you're doing is removing some material off the edge of your Leatherman. Now there, I didn't help anything there. I grew up using a round whetstone, so this motion is more familiar to me. Once again, time. This is a rougher side. That's a smoother side. There are water stones, there are oil stones. Don't worry about that. Just worry about sharpening your implement. Now eventually you'll worry about water stones and oil stones. It's already better. It's not sharp, but it's better. Now a bigger knife, you do better with a bigger stone. And then as with the file on the axe, it's a good idea to look it over and look for that burnished, shiny edge to see where you're doing your cutting and if you're removing material clear to the edge. The last choice, and I can hear you beginning to howl right now, is one of these carbide things that actually removes, cuts material off the edge of your knife. I'm not doing that right. You're supposed to protect your fingers like this, hold your blade stationary. Now anybody can do that, but it's not the preferred method. But you know what the real preferred method is? Is to get the tool sharp enough that you can get back to work. That's the preferred method. So here's a couple things about hauling and towing and fastening loads. Maybe you're going to the box store and coming home with a refrigerator. Maybe you're going down to your neighbor's coming back with a cow to butcher, already dead, and you need to hold it onto the trailer. So you can use chains, you can use a come-along, you can use a ratchet strap, you can use a rope. Here's a few tricks with each one of those. Let's start with a rope. I'm not going to show you a sheep shank. I already showed you that in another video. This is a very easy kind of a backyard trucker's hitch that anybody can do to get a rope tight. You need to put a loop in the rope. So you just put an overhand knot. Now there are other little hitches you can do, but let's just say you can put an overhand knot. Then you take the other end of the rope. I'd put the whole thing through there. Don't worry about pulling the bitter end through. And now you can pull that pretty darn tight. And you just kind of hold it, pass the line around the tight part, standing part as it's called. Do that a couple times with half hitches. And never look into your rearview mirror. Now the one that is better, I mean, once you get the hang of ratchet straps, we've got a video on that, you can pull on something hard and it's dependable. You rig the ratchet strap up, all the details are in those, we've got a couple videos. You can rig it like a pulley right here to get rid of most of the slack, so you're pulling the minimum amount of strap around the winch mechanism. Once it's around once, you don't have to hold that tension. Okay, that's tight. Here's what I like to do. Some of you think it's too sloppy. Check out those videos. Now before I use this come along, let me just point out that good practice with lumber is to build it to some kind of a peak in the middle, so that if you try to tie across a flat load, the pieces in the middle don't have any pull down. You have to have something higher in the middle in order to get vertical push down on a horizontal tie. Does that make sense? Once you rig up a come along across a load, the thing you have to be careful of is cutting into the load with that 1/4-inch cable. I mean, it doesn't take much of a pull before that cable begins to really bite into that load. Okay? Pretty dependable. And then the last one that we demonstrated on tying down equipment, this is a 1/4-inch chain, a rigging chain. This is a ratcheting chain binder. You guys convinced me I should open my mind to that. You engage that little dog in the right direction and you just wind it up. And this is like the come along. This attachment is made to hold down yellow iron, baby. Heavy, slick yellow iron. And so it's going to pull hard enough right now to crush a ladder and break the corners off the lumber. So just be a little careful. 4 ways to tie down a load. First thing, when you're hooking a trailer to a truck, you're taking everybody's life in your hands. In fact, your friends and neighbors, perhaps more than your own. So this moment has to be utmost concentration. First, make sure the ball size is appropriate for the hitch. This requires a 2 5/16 ball. That's exactly what we got. People get into trouble when they mismatch and have a bigger hitch on a smaller ball. It doesn't connect. Okay, so once the ball size is right and you're fully engaged and whatever safety mechanism your hitch comes with is absolutely positively engaged, ain't coming off. And once you make sure that your stinger is safely pinned in, every truck has a different attachment point for the safety chains. Put them on. Around here, the popular wisdom is that you cross your safety chains. In other places, I hear different things. On this trailer, there's a breakaway thing to where if everything goes bad and the truck leaves the trailer and this comes tight, this little wire right here trips an emergency brake lock. And then your lights, you're responsible to make sure you have lights, are inserted and they're checked. And then the last thing that is so easy to forget is to make sure that your jack stand is off the ground all the way. Caution, pinch point, watch your hands. Okay, now this truck is ready to go down the road. I know that load is tied down, and so I can, with a clear conscience, take this out on the highway and jeopardize the life of every other person out there. But repeating myself, and I hope you remember it, check this 3 times before you go out into traffic. Stop the truck, get out, come back, and do an inventory. Because in your whole life, you seldom have a larger likelihood of hurting someone than when you're pulling a truck and trailer down the road, going to the country. So if this video seems kind of random and kind of surface level, you're right. Because how can you cover all the topics about city boy goes to the country? You can't. But we want to try to cover some more of them in future videos. So if you have ideas about the things that you would like to see, that maybe you feel weak on, or that you've seen a deficit in your neighbors when they showed up in the country and didn't know which direction was up, put them in the comments. I read every one of them, and I get good ideas, both for video content and ways to correct the areas where I'm already messing up. Post it, will you? Contrary to what your city boy friends think, you got to be smart to live in the country. And the first part of being smart, living in the country, is to determine from the first day that you're only going to content yourself with being a good neighbor and doing good work. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.